Before I sat down with President Obama, I had a brief interview off camera with the president's national security advisor, General Jim Jones, and he sat in on the nearly 2-hour meeting between President Obama and Prime Minister Putin. And I said, well, what happened there? He said, well, for the first hour, all Mr. Putin did was talk. I said, really? What did he talk about? The Cold War. I said, for an hour? Yes, for an hour. Now, that's not a full hour, Megan. They have to allow time for translation, but essentially, Prime Minister Putin, in his first encounter with President Obama, wanted to give him an hour's worth, with translation, of his take on what happened in the Cold War, how it ended, and where Russia finds itself now, and how it might take its relationship with the U.S. in the future. But all that stuff about the future, or contemporary issues, as you mentioned, North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan, none of that came up in anywhere near the detail that President Obama would have preferred, because the back end of the meeting was when President Obama got a chance to talk, and through the back and forth exchanges, they just didn't cover nearly the substantive ground that they had hoped for, in part because Prime Minister Putin spent so much time reliving or retelling the story of the Cold War. And this whole Cold War history is interesting, Megan, because it is, pardon me, I'm sorry, I think I'll throw it back to you, Megan, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Keep going, Major.
Okay, all right, thank you. I was getting a little confusing directions in my ear. Apologize for that. The Cold War was interesting because in the president's speech at the new economics school here, he said, you know, the Cold War came to a conclusion because of the actions of many nations, not any one nation. And I asked President Obama, wait a minute, can't we say to the Russians, aren't they strong enough to hear that the Cold War was won, that the West won it, and that a series of Republican and Democratic presidents helped achieve that victory? Here's the president's response.
I think that you just cut out Lech Walesa and the Poles. You just cut out Havel and the Czechs. There were a whole bunch of people throughout Eastern Europe who showed enormous courage. And I think that it is very important in this part of the world to acknowledge the degree to which people struggled for their own freedom. I'm very proud of the traditions of Democratic and Republican presidents to lift the Iron Curtain.
There you have it, Megan. Yes, many nations, but still reluctant to tell the Russians here it was the West that won and the U.S. was the driving force. Back to you.
Fascinating. Major.